Yakira Cole could barely afford the champagne bottle in her hand, but she had scraped by to get it. She'd wrapped it herself, tied the silver ribbon with trembling fingers, rehearsed what she'd say when Marcus opened the door. "Merry Christmas. I love you. Let's start over." The door wasn't locked. That should have been her first warning. The apartment was dark except for the bedroom. Soft light spilled from the crack beneath the door, and Yakira heard it, a woman's laugh. High, confident, nothing like her own. Her hand found the doorknob. Turned it. The bottle slipped from her grip before her mind could process what her eyes were seeing. Marcus. Her Marcus. Naked, tangled with a woman who looked like she'd walked off a magazine cover. Blonde hair cascading over pale shoulders. The kind of body Akira prayed for in front of mirrors but never achieved. They didn't even stop. Marcus looked up and his expression wasn't guilt. It was annoyance. "Yakira? What the hell? You can't just walk in here." The other woman, didn't even bother covering herself. She propped herself up on one elbow, smirking like Yakira was the punchline to a joke she'd heard before. "Is this her?" the woman asked, voice dripping with amusement. "The Virgin." Yakira's throat closed. Marcus climbed out of bed, not bothering with clothes, and Yakira's vision tunneled. She should run. Scream. Do something. But her body had turned to stone. "Did you really think I'd marry you?" Marcus said, reaching for his jeans. His voice was casual, like they were discussing the weather. "You're boring, Yakira. Safe. You're the girl guys keep around until someone better shows up." The bottle shattered on the hardwood floor. Yakira didn't remember dropping it. "You're nobody's first choice, baby," Marcus continued, pulling his shirt over his head. "You do realize that, right?" The woman laughed again. Yakira turned and walked out. Her legs moved on autopilot down the hallway, through the door, into the December cold. She didn't have her coat, didn't have her keys, didn't have anything left. Her apartment was silent. Yakira stood in front of her bathroom mirror, mascara streaking her brown cheeks, and whispered the words she'd been holding back for 25 years. "Maybe I really am nothing." Her phone buzzed. Minji's name lit up the screen. "Come to Seoul. Spend Christmas with us. Please. I miss you." Yakira stared at the message for a long moment. Then she opened her laptop and booked a one-way ticket. She didn't pack carefully. Didn't plan. Just threw clothes into a suitcase and prayed that distance could make her feel less small. If you've ever felt invisible, like no matter what you did, you'd never be enough, hit that like button and tell me where you're watching from. Because what happens to Yakira in Seoul will shatter everything she thought she knew about love and about herself. Trust me. You won't see him coming. The thing about running away, Yakira realized somewhere over the Pacific Ocean, was that you brought yourself along for the ride. 14 hours in the air, and Marcus's words still echoed in her skull. Nobody's first choice. She'd bought the cheapest flight, middle seat, crying baby 2 rows back, and spent the entire journey staring at the seat in front of her, wondering if she'd ever stop feeling like an apology for existing. When the plane finally touched down at Incheon International, Yakira's hands were shaking. "Yakira." Minji Park stood at arrivals holding a sign that read, "My favorite human," in glittery letters, her smile so bright it could power the entire terminal. She wore a white cashmere coat that probably cost more than Yakira's entire wardrobe, her long black hair falling in perfect waves. They'd met during Minji's semester abroad at NYU. While other international students stuck to their own groups, Minji had walked right up to Yakira in the library and declared, "You look like you need a friend who'll make bad decisions with you." She'd been right. Now Minji pulled Yakira into a hug that smelled like expensive perfume and home. "You look terrible," Minji said, pulling back to examine her. "What happened?" "Long flight." Minji's eyes narrowed. She'd always been able to read Yakira like a billboard, but she didn't push. "Come on. The car's waiting." The car turned out to be a Mercedes with a driver in a black suit who loaded Yakira's battered suitcase like it was made of glass. Yakira slid into the back seat, suddenly hyper-aware of her discount jeans and drugstore makeup. "This is too much," she whispered. Minji waved a hand. "Please. Dad owns the company that makes these cars. This is nothing." Seoul unfolded outside the window like a fever dream. Skyscrapers pierced clouds, neon signs blazed even in daylight, mountains loomed in the distance. Everything moved faster here, the traffic, the people, the pulse of a city that had no time for sadness. Yakira had spent her whole life in Philadelphia. Row houses and corner stores. People who knew your name and your business. She'd never felt sophisticated there, but at least she'd understood the rules. Here, she was drowning before she'd even gotten wet. So, Minji said, linking her arm through Yakira's. Dad's excited to meet you. I've told him about my amazing American best friend who makes me laugh until I can't breathe. Yakira's stomach clenched. Minji, I don't know if this was a good idea. Your family is, I'm just. Stop. Minji's voice went soft. You're doing that thing again. That thing where you make yourself smaller so other people feel comfortable. I hate that thing. Yakira swallowed hard. My dad is a little intense, Minji continued. He hasn't been the same since Mom died. That was 10 years ago, and he still works 18-hour days like he's trying to outrun grief. He doesn't smile much. Doesn't date. Doesn't do anything except build empires and forget he has a daughter who misses him. There was pain in Minji's voice, the kind that came from loving someone who'd turned themselves into a monument. But he's good, Yakira. And he'll like you. Everyone likes you. Except the men I want to love me, Yakira thought. The car turned onto a private road, and Yakira's breath caught. The Park Estate wasn't a house. It was a statement. Modern architecture merged with traditional Korean design, glass and stone and clean lines that spoke of wealth so old it didn't need to announce itself. Gardens sprawled in every direction, perfectly manicured even in December. Yakira had never felt more out of place in her life. Minji, she whispered. I can't. You can. Minji squeezed her hand. Tonight's just dinner. Wear the black dress I packed for you. Yes, I snuck it into your suitcase. You're welcome, and just be yourself. That's all Dad cares about. Authenticity. Yakira wanted to laugh. Authenticity. As if she had any idea who she really was beneath all the men who'd told her she wasn't enough. That night, standing in the guest room that was bigger than her entire apartment, Yakira stared at her reflection in Minji's borrowed dress. The fabric hugged curves she usually hid. The neckline showed collarbones she'd always thought were too sharp. Her natural hair fell in coils around her face, beautiful, her mother always said, but Marcus had suggested she straighten it. She looked like she was playing dress-up in someone else's life. You can do this, she told her reflection. Her reflection didn't look convinced. The formal dining room could seat 30 people. Tonight, it felt like there were only 2. Yakira descended the stairs with Minji, her borrowed heels clicking against marble, her heart hammering against her ribs. The dress felt like armor and exposure all at once. Through the open doorway, she could see the table, crystal gleaming under chandelier light, white roses in silver vases, everything perfect and terrifying. Dad's already here, Minji whispered, squeezing Yakira's hand. Be normal. He's just a person. Yakira nodded, lying with her silence. They entered the dining room, and the air left Yakira's lungs. Park Jun-suk stood at the head of the table, one hand resting on the back of his chair, and he was nothing like she'd imagined. 45 looked like this, tall, broad-shouldered, a charcoal suit tailored so perfectly it might have been painted on. Silver threaded through his dark hair at the temples, and his face, his face, was all sharp angles and controlled strength. High cheekbones. A jaw that could cut glass. Eyes so dark they looked black in the low light. He looked like a man who'd forgotten how to lose. Their eyes met. The world stopped. Yakira watched something flicker across his face. Surprise? Recognition? Impossible. They'd never met. But the way he stared at her, frozen mid-greeting, made her feel like he'd been waiting for her his entire life. Or maybe that was just wishful thinking from a woman whose last boyfriend had called her nobody's first choice. Dad. Minji bounced forward, breaking the spell. This is Yakira. Yakira, this is my father, Park Jun-suk. He blinked, and the mask slid back into place. Cool. Controlled. Polite. Welcome to our home, Miss Cole. His voice was deeper than she'd expected, not loud, but the kind of quiet that made you lean in to listen. It vibrated through her chest like a bass note. Thank you for having me, Mr. Park, Yakira managed. Her own voice sounded thin in comparison. He moved toward her, and she noticed he walked like someone who'd never questioned whether a room belonged to him. Extended his hand. She took it. His palm was warm, calloused, surprising for a man who lived in suits and boardrooms. His grip was firm but careful, like he was aware of his own strength. Like he was holding something fragile. The handshake lasted 1 second too long. When he released her, Yakira's hand tingled. Please sit. He gestured to the chair beside Minji, directly across from where he stood. Close enough to see every expression. Too far to touch. Perfect torture. Dinner began with small talk, Minji chattering about their plans to visit Myeongdong, the weather, Christmas traditions. Staff appeared and disappeared like ghosts, placing course after course in front of them. Yakira barely tasted any of it. Because across the table, Jun-suk kept looking at her. Not obviously. Not inappropriately. But every time she glanced up, his eyes were there. Steady. Assessing. Like he was trying to solve an equation that didn't add up. Miss Cole, he said during the third course, his voice cutting smoothly through Minji's monologue. My daughter tells me you work in education. Elementary school, Yakira said, grateful for a safe topic. Second grade. 7-year-olds who still believe in magic. Something softened in his expression. That must require enormous patience. Or enormous stubbornness, she said, surprised by her own honesty. Sometimes I'm not sure which. The corner of his mouth twitched. Almost a smile. Perhaps both. The best things usually require both. Their eyes held. Minji, oblivious, launched into a story about her university days. But Jun-suk kept asking Yakira questions. Real questions, not the polite, kind people asked at dinner parties. What made her choose teaching? What did she dream about when she was young? If she could change one thing about her life, what would it be? He listened to her answers like they mattered. Like she mattered. It was intoxicating and terrifying in equal measure. A servant stumbled, dropping a wine glass. It shattered against the floor, red liquid spreading like blood. Everyone flinched, Minji, the other staff, Yakira. Everyone except Jun-suk, whose eyes never left Yakira's face. Are you all right? He asked quietly, ignoring the chaos. She nodded, not trusting her voice. After dinner, Yakira escaped. The terrace was cold and empty, overlooking gardens that stretched into darkness. She pressed her palms against the stone railing, breathing hard, trying to remember why she'd come to Seoul in the first place. To heal. To hide. To feel less broken. Not to develop an impossible, humiliating crush on her best friend's father. What is wrong with me? She whispered to the night. He's Minji's father. He's 45. He probably thinks you're pathetic. Stop. Are you all right, Miss Cole? Yakira spun around, heart leaping into her throat. Jun-suk stood in the doorway, backlit by warm light, his expression unreadable. Yes. Just needed air. He stepped onto the terrace, and she noticed he carried his suit jacket over one arm. He held it out to her. You're shivering. She hadn't noticed until he said it. The cold had numbed her skin, but now she felt it, the bite of winter air against bare shoulders. I'm fine. Take it, please. It wasn't a request. Yakira accepted the jacket, and his scent enveloped her, something clean and expensive with an undertone of cedar. The silk lining was still warm from his body. She wanted to bury her face in it. Instead, she pulled it around her shoulders and said, Thank you. They stood in silence for a moment. Then, you seem sad, Miss Cole. Is it the jet lag or something deeper? The question caught her off guard. Most people didn't look close enough to see past her smile. Just processing some things, she said carefully. Things that made you fly across the world right before Christmas? Her throat tightened. Maybe. You apologize too much, he said quietly. As if existing is a burden. Why? The words hit her like a slap. Not because they were cruel, but because they were true. Yakira opened her mouth to deflect, to laugh it off, to do what she always did when someone got too close. Yakira. Dad. Minji's voice called from inside. Come back. The cook made your favorite dessert. The spell shattered. Jun-suk took a step back, his jaw tight. We should go inside. But as Yakira walked past him, she felt the weight of his gaze like a physical touch. And she knew whatever had started tonight couldn't be stopped. Yakira spent the next 3 days trying to avoid Park Jun-suk. She failed spectacularly. The universe, it seemed, had a cruel sense of humor. The first time was the library. Yakira woke at dawn, still adjusting to the time difference, and wandered through the house looking for coffee. She found the library instead, 3 stories of books, with a spiral staircase and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the gardens. And there he was. Junsuk sat in a leather armchair, reading glasses perched on his nose, a book in one hand and a cup of coffee in the other. He'd traded his suit for a simple black sweater and dark slacks, and somehow that made him more dangerous. Less untouchable. He looked up when she entered, and Yakira froze like she'd been caught stealing. "I'm sorry, I didn't know." "Don't apologize." He set down his book. "The library is for everyone. Would you like coffee?" She should have said no. Should have fled back to her room. Instead, she said, "Yes, please." He poured from a carafe on the side table, his movements economical and precise. Handed her the cup without their fingers touching, though Yakira swore she felt heat anyway. They sat in silence, drinking coffee as the sun rose over Seoul. It felt more intimate than any conversation she'd ever had. The second time was the car. "Dad's driving us to Gangnam," Minji announced that afternoon, bouncing into Yakira's room without knocking. "He says he wants to see the city outside his office windows for once. I think he's having a midlife crisis." "It's adorable." Yakira's stomach dropped. "Maybe I should stay here." "Don't be ridiculous." "Come on." The car was smaller than the Mercedes, a sleek black sedan that smelled like leather and danger. Minji claimed the front seat, which left Yakira in the back, directly behind Junsuk. She could see his hands on the steering wheel. Strong hands, elegant fingers. The way his shoulders moved beneath his shirt when he shifted gears. "So, Yakira," Minji said, twisting around in her seat. "What do you think of Seoul so far?" "It's beautiful," Yakira said honestly. "Overwhelming, but beautiful." "Dad, didn't you say the same thing when you first came here from Busan?" Junsuk's eyes found Yakira's in the rearview mirror. "I did. Sometimes the most beautiful things are the ones that terrify us most." The air in the car thickened. At a red light, they both reached for the same door handle, Junsuk to adjust something, Yakira to steady herself. Their hands collided. Electricity shot up Yakira's arm. He pulled back like he'd been burned. "Sorry." But his eyes in the mirror told a different story. The third time was dinner with guests. "Business associates," Minji explained, rolling her eyes. "Which means boring people talking about money while we smile and look pretty." But Dad insists. The boring people turned out to be 3 men in expensive suits and 1 woman who looked like she'd stepped out of Vogue Korea. "This is Seo Hygiene," one of the men said, gesturing to the woman. "She and Chairman Park have been discussing a potential partnership." The way he said partnership made Yakira's skin crawl. Hygiene was perfect. Tall, sophisticated, the kind of polished beauty that came from expensive salons and careful breeding. She touched Junsuk's arm when she spoke, laughed at his sparse comments, positioned herself at his side like she belonged there. Yakira told herself she had no right to the jealousy burning through her veins. She watched anyway. Junsuk was polite to Hygiene, attentive in the way powerful men were when they wanted something from you. But there was no warmth in his eyes. No spark. Not like when he looked at Yakira across the table, his gaze dark and hungry before he caught himself and looked away. The fourth time was the kitchen. Yakira couldn't sleep. Too many thoughts, too much feeling, Marcus's voice in her head saying nobody's first choice, while Junsuk's eyes said something entirely different. She went downstairs for water and found him there. Tie loosened. Sleeves rolled up. Walls finally down. "Can't sleep either?" he asked. "No." She moved to the sink, hyper-aware of the space between them. "Too much in my head. Want to talk about it?" The question was simple. The way he asked it wasn't. Yakira turned to face him, and maybe it was the darkness or the exhaustion or the fact that she was tired of pretending she was fine, but the truth spilled out. "My ex-boyfriend cheated on me right before I came here. With a woman who is everything I'm not. And when I caught them, he told me I was boring. Safe. Nobody's first choice." Her voice cracked. Maybe he was right. Maybe I'm just. Stop. Junsuk closed the distance between them in 2 strides. He didn't touch her, but he was close enough that she could feel his heat. "That man was a fool," he said, voice low and fierce. "Any man who made you feel small doesn't deserve to speak your name." Yakira's breath caught. "You don't even know me." "I know enough." His jaw tightened. "I know you apologize for taking up space. I know you make yourself smaller so others feel bigger. I know you're terrified someone will look close enough to see what I see. What do you see? The question hung between them like a blade. Junsook's eyes dropped to her mouth, and the air turned molten. You should go back upstairs, Yakira. Her name. Not Miss Cole. Yakira. It sounded like a prayer and a curse and a promise all at once. She didn't move. If you don't leave now. His voice was rough, breaking at the edges. I won't be responsible for what happens next. Dad? Are you down there? Minji's voice drifted from upstairs, sleepy and concerned. They jumped apart like they'd been caught committing murder. Junsook's hands clenched into fists at his sides. Go. Please. Yakira ran. But she felt his eyes on her back the entire way. And she knew they were both already lost. The New Year's Eve party transformed the Park estate into something out of a fever dream. Hundreds of guests glittered through rooms Yakira hadn't known existed, politicians, celebrities, business moguls whose faces she recognized from news headlines. Champagne flowed like water. A string quartet played in one room, a DJ in another. Women wore gowns that cost more than Yakira's annual salary. She wore borrowed confidence and Minji's emerald dress. Stay close, Minji had said earlier, already tipsy. These people are sharks. They'll smell fresh blood. But Minji had disappeared an hour ago, swept into a crowd of university friends, leaving Yakira alone in a sea of people who spoke languages she didn't understand and moved through a world she'd never belonged to. Across the room, Junsook stood surrounded by men in expensive suits and women in expensive everything else. He looked devastating in black tie, every inch the powerful chairman. Untouchable. But his eyes kept finding hers. Even while shaking hands with a diplomat, his gaze would drift across the room and land on her like a touch. Even while a stunning woman whispered something in his ear that made the other men laugh, he was watching Yakira. She should look away. She couldn't. The air between them hummed with everything they weren't saying. Yakira. Minji stumbled toward her, makeup smudged, words slurring. I don't feel good. Yakira caught her before she fell. Okay, let's get you upstairs. Getting Minji to her room was like wrestling a beautiful, drunk octopus. She kept giggling, then crying, then trying to go back to the party. By the time Yakira finally got her into bed, Minji was unconscious, mascara streaked across her pillow. Yakira stood there for a moment, making sure she was breathing steadily, then slipped out. The house was a maze of corridors she didn't recognize. Left, right, another left, nothing looked familiar. The party noise faded to a distant murmur. She turned a corner and froze. This hallway was different. Quieter. More private. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked private gardens. Art that belonged in museums. Junsook's wing. You shouldn't be here. His voice came from behind her, low and controlled. Yakira spun around, heart hammering. He stood 10 feet away, tie loosened, top button undone, looking at her like she was both salvation and damnation. I got lost, she whispered. Minji was sick, and I. Yakira. Her name sounded tortured. You need to leave. Now. Why? Because if you don't. He took a step closer. Then another. I won't be able to stop myself. The air between them caught fire. Then don't stop, Yakira heard herself say. Brave for the first time in her life. Reckless for the first time ever. Something broke in his expression. He closed the distance in 3 strides, backing her against the wall without touching her. But she could feel his heat, smell his cologne mixed with champagne and desperation. Do you know what you do to me? His voice was ragged. Seeing you every day, in my house, at my table, knowing I can't have you? Knowing I shouldn't want you this much. I want you too. The confession ripped from her throat. I've wanted you since the moment I saw you. His control shattered. He kissed her like he was drowning, and she was air, desperate, consuming, years of loneliness pouring into one moment. His hands tangled in her hair, tilting her head back as his mouth claimed hers with a hunger that made her knees buckle. Yakira gasped against his lips, and he swallowed the sound, pressing her harder against the wall. Her hands found his shoulders, his neck, threading through his hair and pulling him closer, closer, never close enough. My room, he growled against her mouth. Now. He lifted her, and she wrapped her legs around his waist as he carried her down the hallway. His bedroom was massive floor-to-ceiling windows, a bed that could sleep 4, everything dark and masculine and undeniably his. He set her down carefully, like she might break. Yakira. His forehead pressed against hers, breathing hard. Are you sure? Because if we do this. I'm sure. She pulled him down for another kiss. I've never been more sure of anything. Clothes fell away like barriers crumbling. His jacket. Her dress pooling at her feet. His hands traced her body with reverence, like he was memorizing every curve, every scar, every imperfection she'd spent years hating. You're beautiful, he whispered against her skin. Perfect. Mine. When he laid her on his bed, Yakira felt tears slip down her temples. Did I hurt you? Panic flooded his voice. No. She pulled him down to her. I've never felt like this. Like I matter. You matter. He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. You matter more than anything. He took his time, patient and gentle, making sure she felt safe, treasured. Every touch was worship. Every kiss a promise. When he finally moved inside her, Yakira cried out, not from pain, but from the overwhelming rightness of it. This was what she'd been waiting for her entire life. I've got you, he murmured against her neck. I've got you. Afterwards, wrapped in his arms, skin against skin, heartbeats synchronizing, Yakira whispered, I've waited my whole life to feel like this. He kissed her forehead, pulling her closer. You were worth the wait. Worth everything. For one perfect moment, the world was exactly as it should be. Then his phone buzzed. Junsuk ignored it at first, but it buzzed again. And again. He reached for it, frowning. Yakira watched his face drain of color. What? She asked, sitting up. What is it? He didn't answer. Just stared at the screen like it was a death sentence. Junsuk, you're scaring me. He turned the phone toward her. The photo was grainy but clear enough. Yakira and Junsuk entering his private wing, his hand on her lower back, her looking up at him with undisguised desire. And in the background, barely visible but unmistakable, Minji's face, stricken with betrayal. Someone sent this to a media outlet, Junsuk said, his voice hollow. It goes live in an hour. Yakira couldn't breathe. No, this can't, Minji saw us. Another message appeared. Choose carefully, Chairman Park. Your reputation or your mistake. The world tilted sideways. Everything they'd just built turned to ash. Yakira awoke alone. For one blissful second, she forgot. Then reality crashed down like a building collapse. Junsuk's side of the bed was cold. A note lay on his pillow, his handwriting precise and devastating. I'm sorry. I should never have touched you. Yakira's hands shook as she read it again. And again. I'm sorry. Not, I love you. Not, we'll figure this out. Just, I'm sorry. Like she was a mistake that needed apologizing for. She dressed in yesterday's clothes, shame burning through her veins, and crept back to her room. Maybe if she was quiet enough, invisible enough, she could pretend last night never happened. The door to her room was open. Minji sat on the bed, still in her party dress, makeup smeared, eyes red and swollen. Minji, Yakira started. How could you? Minji's voice cracked. How could you do this to me? It's not what you think. You used me. Minji stood, shaking. You came here pretending to be my friend, and the whole time you were trying to trap my father. For his money, for his status, for whatever sick reason gold diggers like you have. The words hit like slaps. I never, Minji, please, I would never. Get out. Minji's voice went cold. Pack your things and get out of my house. You're just like every other woman who's tried to sink her claws into him. Except you're worse, because you pretended to be my friend. Minji, please listen. Get out. Yakira fled to the guest room, Minji's sobs echoing behind her. The media exploded. By noon, Yakira's face was everywhere. Every news site, every social media platform, every gossip column in Korea and beyond. Chairman Park's scandalous foreign affair, gold digger or true love? Mysterious American woman caught in billionaire's bedroom. Park Industries stock plummets amid chairman's romance scandal. Someone had dug up her entire history. Photos from high school where she looked awkward and plain. Her failed relationships. Her modest salary. And Marcus. Of course Marcus gave an interview. Yakira was always desperate for male attention, he said, smirking into the camera. Clingy. Needy. I'm not surprised she upgraded to a billionaire. That's quite the step up from a community college teacher. Yukira watched the interview from her room, tears streaming down her face, and felt herself disappear. Invisible again. Except this time, everyone was looking. Her phone rang. Her mother. Her sister. Friends she hadn't spoken to in years, all wanting the story, wanting to know if it was true, if she'd really slept with a billionaire. She turned off her phone. Jun-suk didn't call, didn't text, didn't defend her. The silence was worse than any insult. The board meeting happened that afternoon. Yukira only knew because she heard staff whispering. The board is furious. They're demanding the chairman end it. Choose the company or choose her. She waited for him to choose her. He didn't come. By evening, Yukira understood. He was ashamed. Of her. Of what they'd done. She was exactly what Marcus had always said, nobody's first choice. A mistake that powerful men apologized for. She booked a flight. One way to Philadelphia. Leaving tonight. Packing took 10 minutes. She'd barely unpacked in the first place. Minji didn't come to say goodbye. The staff avoided eye contact. At the estate gates, Yukira's taxi idled while she took one last look. The house stood massive and beautiful against the sunset. And in a third-floor window, she saw him. Jun-suk stood there, one fist pressed against the glass, watching her leave. Their eyes met across the distance. Neither moved. Yukira waited for him to run after her, to fight for her, to choose her. He didn't. She got in the car. Jun-suk stood in his office, tie undone, whiskey untouched, the setting sun painting everything red. His lawyer had left an hour ago after delivering the ultimatum. Sir, if you acknowledge the relationship publicly, you lose controlling interest in the company. The hostile takeover succeeds. Everything you and your late wife built, gone. On his desk sat a photo of Ji-won, his first wife. Beautiful, elegant, the love of his youth. Forgive me, he whispered to her image. I found someone who makes me feel alive again. And I'm about to lose everything to keep her. His phone showed Yukira's flight information. Departing in 2 hours. He looked at Ji-won's photo one more time. Then he grabbed his keys and ran. Incheon Airport was a blur of faces and fluorescent lights. Yukira moved through check-in on autopilot, her passport trembling in her hands. The agent asked if she was all right. She lied and said yes. Everything felt distant, like she was watching herself from outside her body. The girl at the counter wasn't really her. The boarding pass printing out wasn't real. None of this was happening. Flight 2847 to Philadelphia, now boarding at gate 47. The announcement echoed through the terminal, final as a death sentence. Yukira picked up her carry-on and walked toward security. Each step felt like drowning. Like giving up. Like proving Marcus right, she really was nobody's first choice. Jun-suk had let her go. That told her everything she needed to know. She was 10 feet from the security checkpoint when the commotion started. Shouting. People gasping. Phones rising like a wave. Yukira turned around. And there he was. Park Jun-suk, running through Incheon Airport like his life depended on it. No suit jacket, just a white dress shirt untucked over black slacks, hair disheveled, breathing hard. He looked nothing like the controlled chairman who commanded boardrooms. He looked human. He looked desperate. Don't get on that plane. His voice cut across the terminal. Everyone stopped. Stared. Phone cameras turned toward them like weapons. Yukira's vision blurred with tears. Why? Her voice cracked, breaking. So you can apologize again for ruining me? For making me think I mattered? No. He walked toward her, slow and deliberate, every eye in the terminal watching. So I can ruin myself for you. Then Park Jun-suk, chairman of Park Industries, one of the most powerful men in South Korea, dropped to his knees in the middle of the airport. The crowd gasped. Camera flashes exploded like lightning. My name is Park Jun-suk, he said, voice carrying across the terminal. I am 45 years old. I am the chairman of Park Industries. And I am in love with this woman. Yukira couldn't breathe. Couldn't move. Could only stare at him kneeling before her while hundreds of strangers recorded every second. I have been dead for 10 years, he continued, eyes locked on hers. Walking through life like a ghost. Building empires because I didn't know how to build a future. And then she walked into my house and brought me back to life. Tears streamed down Yukira's face. I was a coward this morning, Jun-suk said, his voice rough with emotion. I let fear make my decisions. I let the world tell me what I should want instead of fighting for what I need. And I will regret that for the rest of my life. Your company, Yukira sobbed. Minji, everything you built means nothing without you. He stood, closing the distance between them. I would rather lose an empire than lose the one woman who sees me not as a monument to the dead, but as a man who wants to live. He cupped her face in his hands, thumbs wiping away her tears. You are not invisible, Yukira Cole, he said fiercely. You are not boring. You are not safe. You are not nobody's first choice. His forehead pressed against hers. You are the only thing I see. The only thing I want. The only choice I need to make. Then he kissed her. In the middle of Incheon Airport, with hundreds of phones recording, with his entire world watching, Park Jun-suk kissed Yukira like she was oxygen, and he'd been suffocating his entire life. Yukira kissed him back, years of pain and invisibility dissolving into this one moment. Her hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer, and she tasted salt, his tears or hers, she couldn't tell. The crowd erupted. Some cheered. Some gasped in scandal. Someone started clapping, and it spread like wildfire through the terminal. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Jun-suk kept his hands on her face like he was afraid she'd disappear. Come home with me, he whispered. Fight for us with me. Let the world watch. Let them judge. I don't care anymore. What about Park Industries? Yukira asked. The board? Everything you'll lose. I built that company once. I'll build it again if I have to. His eyes were fierce, certain. But I can't build a life without you. Won't. I choose you, Yukira. Every time. Forever. Yukira looked at the security checkpoint behind her. Her boarding pass. Her escape. Then she looked at Jun-suk, disheveled, desperate, kneeling in an airport for her, and realized something Marcus had never understood. She wasn't nobody's first choice. She was Jun-suk's only choice. Take me home, she whispered. He lifted her off her feet, spinning her around while the crowd cheered, and Yukira laughed through her tears. For the first time in her life, she felt chosen, seen, loved. The videos went viral within the hour. #airport proposal trended worldwide. News outlets called it the most romantic gesture of the year. But Yukira didn't care about any of that. She only cared about the man holding her hand in the back of the car, bringing her knuckles to his lips, whispering, I'm never letting you go again. Promise? She asked. On everything I am. And Park Jun-suk had never broken a promise in his life. They arrived at the estate after midnight. Every light was on. Minji stood in the foyer, arms crossed, eyes red and swollen. She looked small and broken and furious all at once. Minji, Yukira started. Let me, Jun-suk said quietly. He stepped forward, still holding Yukira's hand. Minji, we need to talk. There's nothing to talk about. Minji's voice shook. You chose her over me. Over Mom's memory. Over everything. I chose life, Jun-suk said. And I'm sorry it took me this long to realize I'd stopped living. He guided them to the living room, sat down across from his daughter. Yukira tried to let go of his hand, to give them space, but he held tight. When your mother died, I died with her, Jun-suk said. I kept breathing, kept working, kept pretending. But I was a ghost, Minji. And I made you live with a ghost. Minji's lip trembled. I'm sorry, he continued, his voice breaking. I'm sorry I wasn't there. Sorry I buried myself in work instead of being your father. Sorry I let my grief become a wall between us. Tears spilled down Minji's cheeks. Your mother told me, at the end, that she wanted me to live again. To love again. I promised her I would. He looked at Yukira, then back at his daughter. Yukira didn't steal me from you, sweetheart. She reminded me how to be human. I just didn't want to lose you again, Minji sobbed. Everyone I love leaves or disappears. And when I saw you with her, I thought. You thought I was replacing your mother. Jun-suk moved to sit beside her, pulling her into his arms. Never. Your mother was my first love. The love that built me. But Yukira, his voice softened. She's teaching me how to live with the man I became after loss. Yukira's throat tightened. Minji pulled back, looking at her. Did you really? Did you actually care about him? Or was everyone right about the money? I care about him, Yukira said quietly. So much it terrifies me. I didn't come here looking for this. I came here broken, trying to remember what it felt like to matter. Your father saw me when I couldn't see myself. I'm not trying to replace your mother, Yakira continued. I could never. But I'd like to try being your friend again. If you'll let me. Minji stared at her for a long moment. Then, quietly, you really love him? Yes. And you're not going anywhere? Not unless he asks me to leave. Something shifted in Minji's expression. Not forgiveness, not yet, but the beginning of understanding. This is going to be weird, she finally said. Extremely weird, Yakira agreed. But maybe? Minji took a shaky breath. Maybe we can figure it out. It wasn't a happy ending. But it was a beginning. The board meeting happened 2 days later. The hostile takeover was in full swing. Park Industries stock had dropped 15%. Shareholders were panicking. The board demanded Jun Suk's resignation. Yakira watched from the back of the boardroom, her presence itself a scandal. Chairman Park, the lead director, said coldly, "Your personal indiscretions have cost this company billions. The board votes to remove you as chairman, effective immediately." Jun Suk stood. "Then take it." Shocked silence. "I built this company from nothing," he said calmly. "I'll build it again if I have to. But I will not sacrifice love for profit. I will not teach the next generation that power matters more than humanity. You're throwing away everything your late wife built with you." "My late wife," Jun Suk interrupted, "wanted me to live. She would be ashamed of what I became after her death, a monument, not a man. This woman," he gestured to Akira, "taught me the difference. Then you're a fool. Perhaps. But I'd rather be a fool in love than a successful ghost." The room erupted in argument. Then a voice cut through the chaos. "If you remove my father, you remove me too." Everyone turned. Minji stood at the boardroom door, dressed in a business suit, looking every inch her mother's daughter. "I am Park Minji, heir to 30% of this company through my mother's estate. And I vote to keep my father as chairman." Mississippi Park. "I also vote to modernize this company's values," Minji continued, walking to stand beside her father. "My mother built this company on innovation and integrity. She would never have sacrificed either for fear of change. Love doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. And humanity is what this company has forgotten." Her words hung in the air. One by one, the older board members shifted, whispered, reconsidered. The chairman stayed, one finally said, out of respect for his daughter's courage. The hostile takeover failed. Not because Jun Suk compromised, but because he didn't. Within days, the media narrative shifted. Chairman Park's love story, when power chooses heart. Viral airport proposal becomes symbol of modern romance. Yakira recorded a video that went viral. "My ex-boyfriend told me I was nothing. That I'd never be anyone's first choice. But the man I love taught me something better. I don't need to be everyone's choice. Just the right person's only choice. Thank you, Marcus, for being wrong about me." 3 weeks later, at the company's annual gala, Jun Suk introduced Yakira publicly. "This is Yakira Cole," he said to a room full of Korea's elite. "My partner." In every sense of the word. The cameras flashed. And Yakira smiled, not because she wasn't afraid, but because she finally believed she deserved to be seen. 6 months later, Seoul bloomed. Cherry blossoms fell like snow over the city, painting everything in shades of pink and white. Spring had arrived, and with it, a version of Yakira Cole she'd never known existed. She woke to sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows and the smell of coffee. Jun Suk appeared in the doorway of their bedroom, in the private residence they now shared, carrying 2 cups and wearing nothing but sleep pants and a soft smile. "Good morning, beautiful," he murmured, setting the coffee on the nightstand before pressing a kiss to her bare shoulder. Yakira shivered, still not quite believing this was her life. "Morning." He slid back into bed beside her, pulling her against his chest. They'd done this every morning for months now, but it still felt like a dream. "I love you," he said easily. The words came naturally now, spoken dozens of times a day like breathing. "I love you too." And she believed it. Finally, completely believed it. They sat in comfortable silence, drinking coffee as the city woke below them. Then Jun Suk set down his cup and turned to her, suddenly serious. "Marry me." Yakira's breath caught. "Jun Suk. Not today. Not tomorrow. Whenever you're ready." His thumb traced circles on her wrist. "But I want you to know I'm ready. I want forever with you." Tears pricked her eyes. I don't need a ring to know I'm yours. You'll get one anyway, he replied, that real smile spreading across his face, the one that reached his eyes and made him look 10 years younger. When you least expect it. That evening, Yakira stood on stage at the Latte Hotel, microphone in hand, facing 200 women. The charity event, her project, her vision, focused on women's empowerment and self-worth. Women who'd felt invisible their entire lives. Women like her. I came to Seoul 6 months ago convinced I would never be enough, Yakira said, her voice steady. Every man I'd ever loved had told me I was too plain, too boring, too much, and not enough all at once. I believed them. She found Jun-suk in the audience. He sat in the front row, eyes locked on her, radiating pride and love so palpable she could feel it from the stage. Then I met someone who saw me differently. Not because I changed who I was, but because he taught me to see myself through eyes that weren't clouded by other people's limitations. Applause rippled through the room. Love isn't about being someone's first choice, Yakira continued. It's about being their only choice. Every single day. And learning to choose yourself just as fiercely. The standing ovation shook the chandeliers. Afterwards, Jun-suk took her hand and pulled her onto the dance floor. They moved together slowly, unbothered by cameras or whispers, lost in their own world. The world sees you now, he murmured against her temple. But I saw you first. Yakira looked up at him, this man who'd fought for her when she couldn't fight for herself. You taught me to see myself. Across the room, Minji watched them dance, smiling without fear or jealousy. Just love. As cherry blossoms drifted past the windows and Seoul glittered below them, Yakira pressed her forehead to Jun-suk's and whispered, "Thank you for choosing me." Every day, he promised. For the rest of my life. And in that moment, surrounded by music and light and impossible love, Yakira Cole finally understood what it meant to be enough. Not for the world. For herself. And for the man who'd waited 45 years to feel alive again. If this story touched your heart, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about love that defies all odds. Drop a comment below. What would you risk for a love that finally sees you? Let's talk about it.